So today I want to talk about something that I think is the most important question of this entire war. Not who is winning, not how many strikes have been launched, not what Trump said yesterday or what Iran threatened today. The most important question is this: can America actually stop this war? Can it negotiate a ceasefire? Can it withdraw? Can it find a way out? And the answer, when you look at it carefully, is deeply unsettling. America is trapped. It is stuck. It cannot go forward and it cannot go back. And today I want to explain exactly why, step by step, in simple, easy to understand English. So let us begin. Part 1. This war has its own momentum. The first thing you need to understand about this war is that once a war like this starts, it develops its own momentum, its own logic. It stops being something that politicians and generals control, and it starts controlling them. Think about Ukraine. That war started in February 2022. And from the very first weeks, both sides knew that a negotiated settlement was possible. Both sides knew that continuing the war was causing enormous damage, enormous suffering, enormous economic cost. And yet, 4 years later, that war is still going, still grinding, still destroying lives and economies on both sides. Why? Because once a war starts, stopping it requires one side to accept something deeply painful, to accept loss, to accept humiliation, to accept terms that feel unbearable. And that is something most governments, most leaders find almost impossible to do. This war in Iran is going to follow exactly the same pattern. Neither side will concede defeat, even when it is clearly in their best interest to stop. And this war could drag on for years and years. That is not a prediction. That is a pattern. A historical pattern that repeats itself over and over again. But here's what makes this war even more complicated than Ukraine. Even if America wanted to stop, even if America decided today that it wanted a ceasefire, it cannot. Not because Iran will not negotiate, but because the terms Iran would demand would be so devastating for America that accepting them would be worse than continuing the war. Let me explain this trap very carefully. Part 2, the ceasefire trap. So let us imagine America decides it wants to negotiate a ceasefire with Iran. It picks up the phone, it reaches out through back channels, maybe through Oman or Qatar, and it says, "Let us talk." What does Iran say back? Iran says, "Fine, we will stop fighting, but here are our terms." First, America pays Iran approximately $1 trillion in reparations. $1 trillion for the destruction caused by this war, for the decades of sanctions, for the economic damage inflicted on the Iranian people. Second, and this is the critical one, America must leave the Middle East permanently, pack up its bases, withdraw its forces, remove its military presence from the entire region forever, because Iran's position is very simple. The only way to guarantee Iran's long-term survival is to ensure that America can never come back and do this again. Now, on the surface, some people might say, well, maybe that is not so bad. Maybe America should leave the Middle East anyway. But here is why that thinking completely misunderstands the situation. The moment America leaves the Middle East, a chain reaction begins. A chain reaction that will be catastrophic for the American economy and for American power globally. Let me walk you through this chain reaction step by step. Step 1. The GCC becomes Iran's client states. Right now, the GCC nations, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, they exist under American military protection. America guarantees their safety. America is the reason they can function as independent nations. The moment America withdraws, that protection disappears. And the only nation in the region with the military power to guarantee the safety of the GCC and to control access to the Strait of Hormuz is Iran. So the GCC nations have no choice. They become client states of Iran. They fall under Iranian influence. They have to make their peace with Tehran because without American protection, Iran is the only game in town. Step 2, the petrodollar collapses. Now here is where it gets really serious for America because the GCC is not just a collection of oil-rich desert nations. The GCC is the foundation of something called the petrodollar. And the petrodollar is the single most important mechanism keeping the American economy alive. Let me explain this simply. The GCC sells its oil in US dollars. Every barrel of oil that Saudi Arabia sells, every cubic foot of gas that Qatar exports, It is all priced and sold in US dollars. That means every nation on earth that needs Gulf energy, which is most nations, has to hold US dollars to buy it. That creates a permanent global demand for US dollars. And then the GCC takes those dollars it earns from selling oil and recycles them back into the American economy. It buys American treasury bonds. It invests in American financial markets. It funds American debt. This is the mechanism, this petrodollar recycling that allows America to function with $39 trillion in debt. $39 trillion. The American economy is essentially a Ponzi scheme. It relies on foreign nations continuously buying US dollars and US debt to keep functioning. And the petrodollar is the engine that drives that entire system. Now, the moment the GCC falls under Iranian influence, what happens to the petrodollar? It disappears. The GCC no longer has any reason to sell its oil in US dollars. It no longer has any reason to recycle its earnings back into American markets. The entire foundation of American financial power collapses. And remember, America is sitting on $39 trillion in debt. Without the petrodollar, without foreign nations continuously buying US dollars, the American economy cannot service that debt. It cannot function. The consequences would be catastrophic. Step 3. Japan and South Korea remilitarize. So now let us look at what happens in Asia when America withdraws from the Middle East. Japan and South Korea are watching everything that is happening right now very carefully. They're watching America struggle in Iran. They're watching the limitations of American military power being exposed in real time. And they're asking themselves a very uncomfortable question. If America cannot win decisively against Iran, can America really protect us against China, against North Korea? Can we really trust our entire national security to a nation that is clearly overstretched and struggling? And if America then withdraws from the Middle East, that question becomes impossible to ignore. Because if America is willing to leave the Middle East when things get difficult, it might be willing to leave Asia too. So Japan and South Korea have no choice. They have to remilitarize. They have to build up their own military capabilities. They have to stop relying on American protection and start protecting themselves. Japan, which has been pacifist since World War II, is already talking about the most significant military expansion in its post-war history. That process accelerates dramatically if America withdraws from the Middle East. And here is the consequence for America. Japan and South Korea remilitarizing means they are spending their resources on their own defense instead of buying American weapons and supporting American military infrastructure. Another blow to American economic and strategic power. Step 4, Europe makes peace with Russia. And now let us look at Europe. Right now, Europe is supporting America's confrontation with Russia in Ukraine. It is paying enormous economic costs, energy costs, military costs, refugee costs to maintain that position. But Europe is watching the Middle East very carefully too. And if America withdraws from the Middle East, Europe draws one very logical conclusion. If America is withdrawing from the Middle East, America is retreating. America is pulling back. America is no longer the reliable guarantor of global security it once was. So why are we, Europe, continuing to fight America's war in Ukraine at enormous cost to ourselves? Would it not be in our best interest to negotiate a peace treaty with Russia as soon as possible, before things get even worse? And the moment Europe makes peace with Russia, the entire Western alliance system that America has built over 80 years begins to fracture. NATO loses its coherence. American strategic dominance in Europe evaporates. Another devastating blow to American global power. Step 5, the US dollar loses reserve currency status. So now let us add all this together. The petrodollar collapses. Japan and South Korea stop supporting American military infrastructure. Europe fractures from the Western alliance. What does all of this mean for the US dollar? It means the US dollar loses its status as the global reserve currency. Nations stop holding dollars. Nations stop buying American debt. Nations stop recycling their earnings into American markets. And America, sitting on $39 trillion in debt, has absolutely no way to service that debt without the global demand for dollars that reserve currency status provides. The American economy, which is essentially a Ponzi scheme dependent on foreign nations continuously buying US dollars, collapses. This is why America cannot withdraw from the Middle East. This is the trap. The cost of staying in this war is enormous. But the cost of leaving is even more enormous. America is stuck. It has no good options, only bad ones and worse ones.